Emma Reynolds clutched the hospital bill in her trembling hands, staring at the bold red paid-in-full stamp across its surface. Just yesterday, this same document had shown an astronomical sum that would have taken her years to pay off, $287,000 for her mother's emergency heart surgery and subsequent care. Emma had spent the last 3 weeks working double shifts at the diner and the local bookstore, barely sleeping, just to make the minimum payments. Now, mysteriously, someone had paid the entire balance anonymously. There must be some mistake, she told the hospital billing clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who had watched Emma struggle with payment plans for weeks. No mistake, honey, Mrs. Patterson replied, her tone gentle. Someone called yesterday afternoon and paid the entire balance. They specifically requested to remain anonymous. Emma's mind raced. Who could possibly have that kind of money? And more importantly, why would they spend it on her family? Her mother, Catherine Reynolds, had been a kindergarten teacher for 30 years before her sudden collapse. They lived modestly in a small apartment on the east side of Oak Ridge, far from the wealthy neighborhoods across town. The crisp autumn air hit Emma's face as she exited the hospital, still dazed. Fallen leaves crunched beneath her worn-out sneakers as she walked to the bus stop. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Lily. How'd it go at the hospital? Payment plan approved? Emma's thumbs hovered over the screen. She didn't know how to explain something she couldn't understand herself. Someone paid off Mom's entire bill, all of it, anonymously. 3 dots appeared immediately. What? OMG, who? No idea. I'm freaking out. Emma tucked her phone away as the bus arrived. She needed to get to Riverside Diner for her shift, though her mind was nowhere near ready to take orders and serve plates of greasy food. The bills had been paid, but her mother still needed medication, physical therapy, and countless follow-up appointments. Emma couldn't afford to lose a single shift. At the diner, Emma tied on her apron and tried to focus, but her thoughts kept returning to the mysterious benefactor. Most of the lunchtime customers were regulars, retirees, local business people, and teenagers from the nearby high school. Nothing out of the ordinary. Table 12 needs more coffee, barked Tony, the perpetually annoyed manager. Emma grabbed the coffee pot and made her way to table 12, where a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit sat alone, reading something on his tablet. He was strikingly out of place among the diner's usual clientele. More coffee, sir? Emma asked, noticing his cup was still half full. He looked up and Emma nearly dropped the pot. Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises and one of the wealthiest men in the state. His face was plastered across business magazines and local news. His company had revitalized Oak Ridge's struggling economy by building their headquarters downtown 5 years ago. Please, he said simply, pushing his cup toward her. As Emma poured, she noticed he was reading a medical journal article about breakthrough treatments for cardiovascular disease, the exact condition her mother had. A coincidence, surely. The man probably owned half the medical research companies in the country. Thank you, he said, his voice deep and measured. His eyes, a striking shade of grey, lingered on her name tag. Emma. You're welcome, sir, she replied automatically, fighting the urge to stare. Alexander Reed was legendary in Oak Ridge, not just for his business acumen, but for his philanthropy. His foundation had funded the new library, renovated parks throughout the city, and established scholarship programs at the community college. But why would he be having lunch in this shabby diner when 5-star restaurants would roll out the red carpet for him? Throughout her shift, Emma caught Reed watching her several times. Each time she approached his table, he asked for something trivial. Water, napkins, eventually the check. When she returned with his credit card receipt, he had left a $100 tip on a $17 lunch. Sir, this is too much, Emma said, trying to return the receipt. It's not, he replied, standing to leave. At his full height, he towered over her. You look like you've had a long day already, Emma. Take care. And then he was gone, leaving Emma staring after him, the generous tip in her hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that his appearance wasn't coincidental. That evening, Emma sat beside her mother's bed, holding her frail hand. Catherine had been discharged from the hospital now that they no longer needed to keep her for insurance reasons, but she was still weak. You look troubled, sweetheart, Catherine said, her voice thin but warm. Is it the bills again? Emma squeezed her mother's hand. Actually, Mom, the bills have been paid. All of them. Catherine's eyes widened. What? How is that possible? Someone paid them anonymously. Nearly $300,000 Gone. That's... Who would do such a thing? Emma shook her head. I have no idea, but I intend to find out. The next morning, Emma called in sick to the bookstore, something she never did, and made her way downtown to the imposing glass tower of Reed Enterprises. The security guard gave her a suspicious look as she approached the reception desk in her simple jeans and sweater. I need to see Mr. Reed, she said, gathering all her courage. The receptionist, a polished woman with a perfect blonde bob, barely glanced up. Do you have an appointment? No, but Mr. Reed's schedule is fully booked for the next 3 months. You can leave your contact information and someone will reach out if... Please, Emma interrupted. Tell him Emma Reynolds is here, from Riverside Diner. The receptionist looked doubtful, but picked up her phone. After a brief hushed conversation, she appeared genuinely surprised. 30th floor, his assistant will meet you at the elevator. 20 minutes later, Emma found herself seated across from Alexander Reed in his corner office, the entire city spread out below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. Up close, she noticed the faint lines around his eyes that suggested he was older than he appeared in photographs, probably in his late 30s. Miss Reynolds, he said, folding his hands on his desk. This is unexpected. Emma took a deep breath and met his gaze directly. Mr. Reed, did you pay my mother's hospital bills? His expression remained carefully neutral. Why would you think that? Because you were reading about her condition yesterday. Because you left an absurd tip. Because you're known for philanthropy. And because you're one of the few people in this city who could afford to pay that much without blinking. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Observant. Was it you? Emma pressed. After a long moment, he nodded once. Yes. Emma exhaled sharply. Why? You don't know us. My mother never taught your children. You don't have any. We've never met before yesterday. Alexander Reed stood and walked to the window, his back to her. Actually, Emma, we have met before. A very long time ago. He turned to face her. You don't remember me, but 25 years ago your mother saved my life. Emma stared at Alexander Reed, certain she'd misheard him. The sleek office seemed to shrink around her as she processed his words. That's impossible, she finally said. I'm only 23. 25 years ago, I wasn't even born. Alexander returned to his chair, his expression softening. I was referring to your mother, Catherine. She saved my life before you were born. My mother. Emma leaned forward, confused. She's been a kindergarten teacher her entire career. She's never mentioned knowing you. Alexander's fingers drummed lightly on his desk. Before she taught kindergarten, Catherine volunteered at Oak Ridge Youth Center while studying for her teaching degree. I was 15, homeless, and had just aged out of the foster care system. Emma's breath caught. This powerful man before her, the same Alexander Reed whose name adorned half the buildings downtown, had been homeless. The contrast between that image and the imposing figure in the tailored suit was impossible to reconcile. I didn't know she worked there, Emma admitted quietly. Most people who knew Catherine back then don't remember. It was only for about 18 months. He opened a drawer and removed an old photograph, sliding it across the desk. Emma picked it up gingerly. The image showed a group of teenagers standing outside a brick building with a young Catherine, her hair longer, her smile the same, standing among them. At the edge of the group stood a lanky boy with defiant eyes and a guarded expression. Even without the confident posture and expensive clothes, Emma recognized Alexander Reed. My life was heading in a dangerous direction, he continued, his voice measured. I was angry, desperate, and making poor choices. Your mother was the first person who saw something in me worth salvaging. She convinced me to return to school, helped me apply for scholarships, and sometimes, his voice wavered slightly, sometimes she would bring me home-cooked meals when the center was closed. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she recognized one of her mother's greatest qualities, her boundless compassion for others, especially those who needed it most. Why didn't she ever mention you? Emma asked, returning the photograph. Alexander's smile held a trace of sadness. After I got my scholarship to Boston University, we lost touch. I always meant to find her when I made something of myself, to thank her properly. But time passed and I built my company and... He shrugged. Life got in the way. Until now, Emma supplied. Until 6 weeks ago, he corrected, when I saw her name on the hospital donor recognition wall. She'd made a small donation to the children's wing in your name on your birthday last year. I recognized it immediately. Emma nodded, remembering how her mother had insisted on making that donation despite their tight budget. That sounds like Mom. I started asking about her discreetly. When I learned about her condition and the financial burden it placed on both of you, paying the bills seemed like the least I could do. His gray eyes met hers directly. I never intended for you to find out. The donation was meant to be anonymous. Yet you came to the diner yesterday, Emma pointed out. Why? A faint flush colored Alexander's cheeks. I wanted to see how you were doing. The hospital administrator mentioned you were working 2 jobs, barely sleeping. I was concerned. Emma felt a complex mix of emotions, gratitude for his generosity, discomfort at being observed without her knowledge, and lingering suspicion about his true motives. While I appreciate what you've done, Mr. Reed, I need to be clear about something. My mother and I don't need charity. It's not charity, he interrupted firmly. It's repayment of a debt that's 25 years overdue. Your mother changed the course of my life when no one else believed in me. Everything I've built began with her kindness. Emma considered his words, trying to imagine this powerful businessman as the troubled teenager in the photograph. Before she could respond, his intercom buzzed. Mr. Reed, your 11 o'clock is waiting, his assistant's voice announced. Alexander nodded. Miss Reynolds, I have meetings for the rest of the day, but I'd like to continue this conversation. Would you and your mother join me for dinner tomorrow evening? There's more I'd like to discuss with both of you. Emma hesitated. My mother is still recovering. She gets tired easily. I understand. We could meet at your apartment if that's more comfortable for her, or perhaps next week when she's feeling stronger. The sincerity in his voice persuaded her. Tomorrow might work. I'll need to check with her first. Alexander wrote something on a business card and handed it to her. My personal number. Let me know what would be best for Catherine. As Emma rose to leave, a thought struck her. One more question, Mr. Reed. How did you pay the bill without the hospital revealing your identity? I thought medical billing had strict privacy protocols. A small smile played at his lips. When you donate the money for an entire hospital wing, they tend to be accommodating about certain requests. Emma's eyes widened. You built the cardiac care center. 3 years ago, he confirmed, long before I knew your mother would need it. Life has a strange way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Outside Reed Enterprises, Emma stood on the bustling sidewalk, still processing everything she'd learned. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Any news on the mystery benefactor? Emma stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. The truth seemed too fantastical, that one of the richest men in the state had once been a homeless teenager, saved by her mother's kindness, and now he had reappeared in their lives at their most desperate moment. It felt like something from a movie, not real life. She finally typed, You wouldn't believe me if I told you, call you later. That evening, Emma sat on the edge of her mother's bed, recounting her meeting with Alexander Reed. Catherine listened silently, her expression shifting from surprise to disbelief to remembrance. Alex Reed, she whispered when Emma finished. I can hardly believe that troubled boy became, well, who he is now. So you do remember him? Emma asked. Catherine nodded slowly. Of course I do. He was brilliant but wounded, so angry at the world. I always wondered what happened to him after college. She smiled faintly. I never connected him to the Alexander Reed I'd read about in the newspapers. The Alex I knew wore the same tattered jacket every day and could solve complex math problems in his head. He wants to have dinner with us tomorrow, Emma said. I told him I'd check if you're feeling up to it. Catherine's eyes lit up with an energy Emma hadn't seen since before the surgery. Absolutely. I'd love to see him again. Later that night, as Emma prepared for bed, she examined the business card Alexander had given her. Turning it over, she noticed he'd written something on the back. Your mother once told me that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems forgotten. She was right. Emma smiled, programming his number into her phone. As she began typing a message to confirm dinner, another text from him appeared. One more thing I forgot to mention today. I may have a job opportunity that matches your qualifications perfectly, if you're interested. Emma stared at the message, feeling like her life was shifting beneath her feet. Yesterday she'd been drowning in debt and despair. Today, possibilities were unfolding that she couldn't have imagined. She wasn't naive enough to think everything would be magically fixed, but for the first time in months, hope felt tangible. What she didn't know was that Alexander Reed had plans that would change her life in ways neither of them could predict. Emma spent the entire next day in a state of nervous anticipation. She had agreed to Alexander's suggestion that dinner be held at her apartment, where her mother would be most comfortable. Now, as 6 o'clock approached, she hurried around their modest two-bedroom home, straightening throw pillows and rearranging flowers she'd splurged on from the corner market. "Emma, dear, stop fussing," Catherine called from her armchair by the window. "It's just dinner with an old acquaintance." Emma shot her mother a skeptical look. "An old acquaintance who happens to be worth billions and just paid off your medical bills. I think this merits a little fussing." Catherine smiled, looking stronger than she had in weeks. She'd insisted on wearing her favorite blue dress and had even applied a touch of makeup. Alex was never concerned with appearances, even as a boy. I doubt that's changed, despite his success. A sharp knock at the door made Emma's heart leap. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed her simple black dress, the nicest one she owned, and opened the door. Alexander Reed stood in the hallway, holding a bouquet of lilies and a bottle of wine. He'd traded his business suit for dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, though Emma suspected his casual attire cost more than her entire wardrobe. "I hope I'm not too early," he said, handing her the flowers. "Right on time," Emma replied, accepting the bouquet. "Please come in." As Alexander stepped into the apartment, his eyes immediately found Catherine. For a moment, he stood perfectly still, something vulnerable flickering across his usually composed features. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said softly. Catherine's eyes crinkled with warmth. "Alex, after all these years." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking her hand gently. "You look exactly the same," Catherine laughed. "Now that's a polite lie if I've ever heard one." "It's the eyes," he insisted. "They haven't changed at all." Emma busied herself arranging the lilies in a vase, giving them a moment of privacy. When she returned, Alexander was showing Catherine pictures on his phone. His company's charitable foundation projects, she gathered from the conversation. Dinner was delivered shortly after, not from a local restaurant as Emma had expected, but prepared by Alexander's personal chef and brought by his driver. The meal was exquisite: roasted salmon, fresh vegetables, and a chocolate dessert that melted in Emma's mouth. Throughout dinner, Catherine and Alexander reminisced about the youth center, with Catherine filling in Emma's knowledge about her mother's life before she became a teacher. "Your mother was the only person at that center who treated us like normal teenagers," Alexander explained to Emma. "Everyone else looked at us with pity or suspicion. Catherine looked at us and saw potential. They were all so bright," Catherine added. "They just needed someone to believe in them." "Whatever happened to the others?" Alexander asked. "Like Marcus and Sophia?" A shadow crossed Catherine's face. "Marcus joined the military. He was killed in Afghanistan 12 years ago." Alexander's expression fell. "I'm sorry to hear that. He was a good kid." "And Sophia is a nurse at Oak Ridge Memorial now," Catherine continued, her voice brightening. "She brings her children to visit me sometimes." As the evening progressed, Emma observed the easy rapport between her mother and Alexander. Despite the years and vastly different life paths, there was a genuine connection that transcended social barriers. Catherine seemed more animated than Emma had seen her since before the heart attack. When Catherine began to tire, Emma helped her to bed, leaving Alexander looking through old photo albums Catherine had insisted on showing him. "She needs to rest," Emma explained when she returned. "The doctors say it will be months before her stamina returns to normal." Alexander nodded, closing the album carefully. "She's a remarkable woman. You're very much like her." The compliment caught Emma off guard. "Thank you," she said, beginning to clear the dishes. "About that job opportunity I mentioned," Alexander said, helping her gather plates despite her protests. "I've been establishing a new foundation focused on educational support for at-risk youth. Given your background in education and your personal experience with financial hardship, I think you'd be perfect as our community outreach coordinator." Emma nearly dropped the glass she was holding. "Mr. Reed." "Alexander, please." "Alexander," she corrected. "I don't have any foundation experience. I studied elementary education, but I haven't even finished my degree. I had to drop out when money became too tight," he finished for her. "I know. That's partly why I think you're ideal for this position. You understand firsthand the obstacles these kids face, and you can finish your degree while working for us. Tuition assistance is part of the benefits package." Emma set the dishes down, needing a moment to process his offer. "This feels too convenient, too perfect. I'm not offering charity, Emma," he said, his grey eyes serious. "I'm offering an opportunity based on your qualifications and character. I've done my research. Your professors spoke highly of your work before you had to leave the program. Emma's eyes narrowed. You've been checking up on me. Alexander had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I wanted to know more about Catherine's daughter. Is that so surprising? Before Emma could respond, her phone rang with the hospital's number displayed. Her stomach dropped as she answered. Miss Reynolds, this is Dr. Patel. We've reviewed your mother's latest test results, and there's a complication we need to discuss. We've detected a secondary blockage that wasn't addressed in the initial surgery. Emma's knees weakened, and she sank onto a kitchen chair. What does that mean? She'll need another procedure. A less invasive one this time, but still significant. We should schedule it as soon as possible. After getting the details and ending the call, Emma looked up to find Alexander watching her with concern. What's wrong? He asked. Mom needs another surgery, she said, her voice hollow. There's a blockage they missed. The familiar wave of panic began to rise. More medical bills, more time off work, more strain on their already precarious finances. Alexander moved to her side. Emma, look at me. His voice was firm but gentle. Your mother's medical expenses are covered, all of them, present and future. I've arranged everything with the hospital. You can't just... I can, he interrupted. And I have. This isn't about money or obligation. This is about making sure Catherine gets the care she deserves. His expression softened. Please, let me help. Not as a billionaire or a CEO, but as someone whose life she changed. Emma felt tears threatening. Why are you really doing all this? The bills, the job offer? It feels like too much. Alexander's gaze remained steady. Because 25 years ago, I made a promise to myself. I promised that if I ever succeeded, I would find a way to repay your mother's kindness. I never expected it would take so long, or that when I finally found her again, she would be in crisis. But now that I have, I intend to keep that promise. What he didn't say, what Emma couldn't possibly know, was that his interest extended beyond repaying an old debt. The job offer was genuine, his admiration for Catherine real. But there was more to the story than he was ready to reveal, a truth that would upend everything Emma thought she knew about her life and his connection to her family. 2 months passed in a whirlwind of changes. Catherine's second surgery was successful, and her recovery progressed steadily under the care of the top cardiologists at Oak Ridge Memorial. Emma had accepted Alexander's job offer and thrown herself into establishing the new Youth Foundation, working directly from a small office in the Reed Enterprises building. Today marked her 8th week in the position, and Emma sat at her desk reviewing applications for the Foundation's first scholarship program. The work energized her in a way her previous jobs never had. Each day brought new challenges, but also the satisfaction of creating opportunities for young people facing circumstances she understood intimately. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Alexander stood in her doorway, his tall frame leaning casually against the jamb. Despite their daily proximity, Emma still felt a flutter whenever he appeared unexpectedly. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course," she replied, setting aside her work. Alexander closed the door behind him and took a seat across from her desk. "The board approved all your recommendations for the scholarship committee. They were impressed with the selection criteria you developed." Emma smiled. "That's wonderful news. We can start interviewing candidates next month." "There's something else I wanted to discuss," Alexander continued, his usual confidence seeming slightly dimmed. "Something personal." Emma felt her pulse quicken. Over these past weeks, their professional relationship had developed alongside a growing friendship. Alexander regularly joined Emma and Catherine for dinner, sometimes bringing work for Emma to review, other times simply enjoying their company. Catherine had blossomed under his attention, regaining her strength and spirit with each visit. "I've been sorting through some old personal effects," Alexander said, placing a worn leather journal on her desk. "I found this while cleaning out a storage unit I've had since college." Emma looked at the journal curiously. "What is it?" "It belonged to my mother, my birth mother. I never knew her. She died when I was 3. This journal and a few photographs were all I had of her when I entered foster care." Emma's heart ached for him. Alexander rarely spoke of his childhood before the youth center. "I'm sorry, Alexander. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been." "I never read it completely until last week," he continued. "I wasn't ready before, but something about reconnecting with Catherine made me want to understand my own past better." He gently opened the journal to a marked page and turned it toward Emma. "Read this entry, dated September 17th, 25 years ago." Emma carefully took the journal, noting the delicate handwriting filling the page. September 17th, 1999. "I met the most remarkable woman today at the hospital, a volunteer named Catherine Reynolds. She sat with me during my treatment, talking about her work at the youth center and her dreams of becoming a teacher. When I told her about my son and my fears for his future after I'm gone, she promised to look out for him if she ever encountered him. Children find their way to the people who need them and who they need in return," she told me. I hope she's right. Alex deserves someone who believes in him the way this kind woman does in her students. Emma looked up, her eyes wide. "Your mother knew mine? Before the youth center?" Alexander nodded, his expression intense. "Catherine didn't remember when I asked her. She volunteered with so many patients over the years. But she was there, Emma, with my mother during her cancer treatments. And then, years later, I found my way to her youth center just as my mother had hoped." "That's incredible," Emma whispered, the coincidence seeming almost too perfect to be random. "There's more," Alexander said, his voice growing softer. "Keep reading." Emma turned the page and continued. October 3rd, 1999. "Catherine visited again today. She brought a small toy for Alex, though she's never met him. She showed me a picture of her beautiful baby girl, just 6 months old. Emma, she calls her. Such a perfect name for a perfect child. Catherine's husband took the photo before he was deployed overseas. She doesn't say it, but I can see she's afraid he won't return. We are both mothers facing uncertain futures for our children. I made her promise that if anything ever happened to me and if she ever met my Alex, she would tell him about me, about how much I loved him." Emma's hands trembled as she set down the journal. "Your mother knew me as a baby, and my father—" Her voice trailed off. "Your father was a Marine killed in action when you were 8 months old," Alexander finished gently. "I didn't know until Catherine told me last week. She never got to tell me about my mother. By the time I arrived at the youth center, my foster care records had been sealed, and she didn't make the connection to the woman she'd met years before." Emma felt tears prickling behind her eyes. "All these connections, across so many years. It seems impossible." "I've stopped believing in coincidences," Alexander said, reaching across the desk to take her hand. "Finding Catherine again, meeting you, it feels like something my mother set in motion 25 years ago is finally coming full circle." His touch sent warmth spreading through Emma's fingers. Over these past weeks, she tried to ignore the growing attraction she felt toward him, telling herself it was inappropriate given their professional relationship and the debt she owed him. But in moments like this, those barriers seemed to dissolve. "Emma," Alexander said, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper, "I need to be honest with you. My interest in you has grown beyond professional admiration or gratitude for Catherine. I find myself thinking about you constantly. Your determination, your intelligence, your compassion, they've captivated me in ways I never expected." Emma's breath caught. "Alexander, Please let me finish," he said. "I've struggled with whether to tell you this, worried you might feel obligated or uncomfortable. The last thing I want is for you to think my help came with expectations. It didn't, but I can't deny my feelings any longer." Emma sat perfectly still, her heart racing. "I've been fighting similar feelings," she admitted. "I kept telling myself it was just gratitude or that I was confusing admiration with attraction. I didn't want to complicate everything you've done for my mother and me." Alexander's grey eyes lit with hope. "Then perhaps we could explore these feelings together. Start with dinner, not as employer and employee, or as old friends catching up, but as two people who might have something special between them." Emma smiled, the weight of unspoken emotions finally lifting. "I'd like that." That evening, Emma sat beside her mother's bed, recounting her conversation with Alexander. Catherine smiled knowingly. "I wondered when you two would finally admit what's been obvious to me for weeks." "You knew?" Emma asked, surprised. "Of course I knew. The way he looks at you when you're not watching. It's the same way your father used to look at me." Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand. "Life takes unexpected turns, Emma. Sometimes the hardest moments lead us exactly where we need to be." 3 days later, Emma stood beside Alexander on the balcony of his penthouse apartment. The city lights spread out below them like fallen stars. Their first official date had been perfect. A private dinner prepared by his chef, conversation that flowed effortlessly, and now this moment of quiet connection as they gazed at the view. "I never imagined my life could change so completely in such a short time," Emma said softly. Alexander turned to her, the moonlight catching in his eyes. "Your mother once told me that kindness creates ripples that travel farther than we can see." She was right, as usual. As his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss, Emma felt the final pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving fall into place. Their connection, built on shared history, mutual respect, and growing affection, felt both new and somehow predestined. Some might call it chance that brought Alexander Reed back into Catherine's life at the moment they needed him most. But as Emma deepened the kiss, her heart full of hope for the future unfolding before them, she knew better. It wasn't chance at all. It was the result of a kindness offered freely 25 years ago, finally finding its way home.